Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. Today we are going to discuss regarding jugular venous pressure and jugular venous pulse. In short, we always call JVP. But there are two components, one pulse and second is pressure. All my video lectures are mainly for educative purpose. This particular is very important from theory point of view, that is your theory exam as well as oral exam, and very useful in your everyday practice. It will be useful to any student who is going to do practice. Regarding jugular venous pressure and jugular venous pulse, we'll be discussing in two separate portions, pressure and pulse. Now, what is jugular venous pulse? It is defined as oscillation of top of the vertical column of blood. As we examine right internal jugular vein, we always mention in right internal jugular vein that reflects the pressure changes in the right atrium during cardiac cycle. That we call as a pulse. While vertical height of an oscillating column of the blood denotes or it represents the pressure in the internal jugular vein, right internal jugular vein, which is indirectly parallel to pressure in the right atrium. So, pressure is a height of oscillating column, while oscillating top of the vertical column in right internal jugular vein, which will produce a pulse wave in a jugular vein, that we call as a jugular venous pulse. So, jugular venous pulse is by observation, and then you can record it. Pressure is also by observation. You can measure and you can also record it. Why external jugular vein is not taken into account for pressure or a pulse? Internal jugular vein are very close to right atrium, or indirectly we call internal jugular vein becomes superior vena cava and then it enters into the right atrium. So there is a direct course from innominate vein to the superior vena cava and right atrium. Hence, it is almost giving you the same changes what is taking place in the right atrium, because there is no wall in between. So wall at the proximal part of the external jugular vein are more than internal jugular vein. So you cannot take into account external jugular vein. External jugular vein passes through more facial planes, hence affected by extrinsic compression. Also, increased sympathetic activity in a congestive heart failure will produce vasoconstriction of external jugular vein, and that will change the pulsation in external jugular vein. That's the reason why internal jugular vein is taken into account. And again, in internal jugular vein, we take a right internal jugular, because right internal jugular vein and inferior vena cava are in a straight line from SVC and right atrium. Left internal jugular vein and internal jugular vein, that is not in a straight line. Left internal jugular vein may get compressed by variety of a normal structure, maybe dilated aorta, maybe aneurysm, etc. And it is difficult on the right side to look for the left side also. These are all the reason, but the main reason is right internal jugular vein is in a straight line with superior vena cava and directly into right atrium, and there are no walls. So it is in a straight line, and as it is in a straight line, it will reflect right atrial pressure changes directly into internal jugular vein, and that is preferred. While left internal jugular vein is not in a straight line, and it can be affected by the structures in mediastinum, hence it is not taken into account. So you can see here, this is right atrium, this is superior vena cava, and this is almost in a straight line. Hence, any pressure changes in the right atrium will directly reflect the pressure changes and pulse wave in internal jugular vein. While this left side internal jugular vein is indirect connection. It is not in a straight line, as well as the mediastinal structure which are present here will have some effect on left internal jugular. And as far as external jugular is concerned, this particular has got a valvular structures. So it does not give you a direct pressure changes from a right atrium. Valve will have effect on pressure changes. Hence, external jugular is also not taken into account. How you measure the jugular venous pulse? It is just mainly by observation. You confirm by either recording. So confirmation is mainly done by a recording, because if you cannot make out a pulse properly, then you can take a record of a jugular venous pulse and then you decide. If it is clearly seen, then you can see the top level of the oscillating column and you can see the wave. That we call as a jugular venous pulse. Whenever you want to visualize or whenever you want to observe, patient should be in a supine posture comfortably. Now in a supine posture, the pressure in the right atrium is not exactly equal to that of a internal jugular, because the gravity is now not working. And when the person is in a sitting posture, because of gravity being working, the pressure changes in the right atrium may not be exactly reflecting into internal jugular. Hence, by and large, the 45-degree angle is being taken. So trunk is inclined by an angle of 45 degree. We'll show you the diagram. Elevate the chin and slightly rotate the head to the left side so that the right side sternocleidomastoid becomes little prominent. Neck and trunk should be in the same line. When the neck muscles are relaxed, shiny beam of light tangentially across the skin over the internal jugular vein to see the pulsation. Now this internal jugular vein is medial to sternomastoid, between sternomastoid and trachea. Simultaneously, you put your finger on a carotid artery, or you can do a cardiac auscultation, or you can put the finger on radial pulse and compare the wave which you can see in a jugular venous pulse and correlate with the cardiac cycle. The wave which comes with ventricular systole is a V wave, while the wave which is just before the ventricular systole is a A wave. A wave is more prominent as compared to V wave. So in a method, person is also asked to have Valsalva maneuver, that is deep inspiration followed by forceful expiration across the closed glottis. The internal jugular vein will become more prominent. Choose the position on internal jugular vein away from the carotid artery. This is partly done by rotating your head towards the left side. Place the pulse transducer over the vein and keep it in position with a self-adhesive plaster. And now you can take a record and connect it to the recorder. This is what we call as a jugular venous pulse recorder. So whenever you want to record, this is a technology. Now when you throw the light, you look at the medial to sternomastoid. This is a sternomastoid. This is trachea, and medial to that is internal jugular vein. So you will be able to see that. Now if the jugular venous pressure is being elevated, then only you will be able to see very clearly the internal jugular vein. But by and large, the major portion of internal jugular vein is behind the sternomastoid. So it becomes extremely difficult to identify. So here you can see this is external jugular vein, which is markedly prominent. But ideally, the internal jugular vein pulsation will be seen in this area, which is little difficult to identify. But if you give a proper position and then observe, you may be able to identify. I've already mentioned that in supine posture, it will be extra volume of blood in an internal jugular vein giving you a false reading, and in a vertical position, because of gravity, the level of a blood column in internal jugular vein will be diminished, which will give you a false low reading. So best way is to keep in a 45-degree angle. Some people, that is particularly in a Harrison, it is said that the angle should be 30-degree. So you can keep at a 30-degree or you can keep at a 45-degree. By and large, everyone keeps at a 45-degree. So you maintain this position. Neck and trunk should be well relaxed. Slightly rotate the head to the left side, not an extreme rotation. Sternomastoid becomes prominent. You can see this is an external jugular vein, and this will be the portion where you will be able to see the internal jugular vein pulsation. So you try to identify the pulsation just medial to sternomastoid, and then you will have to calculate the height. So that will just explain you later on. So this is sternomastoid. This is internal jugular. Major portion is behind the sternomastoid, and a small portion will come here, which will be just below the skin, medial to sternomastoid and lateral to trachea. Lateral to trachea. And if you look here, you can see the carotid artery is medial and internal jugular vein is lateral. So the lateral pulsation, and when you see a two pulsation, two wave, with each pulse is venous. So this is lateral, carotid artery is medial, and it is medial to sternomastoid and lateral to medial structure, that is trachea. Now, what you look in JVP? One, we see pulsation. Now, if pulsation is visible, very clearly visible, by and large, the jugular venous pressure is elevated, by and large. Now, what we try to elicit is, we call abdominal jugular reflex, or we call hepatojugular reflex. So you press on the abdomen and watch for the pulsation. If there is a change in the pulsation, confirms that it is a venous pulsation, and note whether raised or not. So when you press and if it gets increased, it is in favor of hepatojugular reflex. And if the pulsation doesn't change, it is more likely to be arterial. This is one very easy way to confirm whether it is a venous or whether it is arterial. Another way, pulsation is not visible. Now press on the abdomen and watch just above the clavicle, because that is the portion, if I show you here, this portion, this is clavicle, just above the clavicle, where you have got the two tendons of sternomastoid getting inserted, and this is the triangle where jugular vein is just visible. If you try, you will be able to make out. So in that area, if you see pulsation, press on abdomen and look for the pulsation. If JVP becomes visible, it is jugular vein, and if still not visible, could be normal, because we are not able to see clearly. At least jugular venous pressure is not elevated. So that will be one of the way. So this is one technology which is being utilized. By and large, whenever external jugular vein is markedly prominent, indirectly indicates JVP is elevated. If you still can't make out a jugular vein very clearly, try to observe. I've already shown you the site. Try to observe in this area. If it is clearly seen, if you see that portion is full and you see the pulsation, and if you see two wave with each pulse more in favor of jugular vein pulse, we call A and V wave. It is medial to sternomastoid, lateral to trachea. And if you see only one single wave, it is more in favor of arterial. We'll give you the difference. Very frequently asked in a short note and very frequently asked in your oral. So whenever you want to examine for jugular venous pulse, observe for jugular venous pulse wave and assess the response to venous pressure on abdominal compression. We call it as a hepatojugular reflux, which indirectly reconfirms that it is jugular vein only. And also you can do a second technology, that is you can estimate the central venous pressure, or you can auscultate for cervical venous sum. These are the two additional things which are being looked forward along with observation for jugular venous wave, pulse wave, which are two wave, A and V wave, and you can look for a hepatojugular reflux. And if you estimate the central venous pressure by a catheter, that gives you also idea regarding a jugular venous pressure. And you can auscultate for the cervical venous sum if there is an increased blood flow. Also you can look for the pulse wave effect by deep inspiration and expiration. If there is an increase in pressure during inspiration, it is in favor of a Kussmaul's signs, which is constrictive pericarditis, more common rather than cardiac tamponade. So it is more common in constrictive pericarditis as compared to cardiac tamponade. So that is called Kussmaul's sign. You are aware of Kussmaul's breathing, but this is Kussmaul's sign, where on a deep inspiration, the pressure in the jugular vein column will increase. Now there are other way of also quantifying, means you want to identify how much indirect way. That is, one is called Moodley's sign, Moodley's sign, which determines the wave you are viewing. What you do, you feel for the radial pulse and simultaneously watch for JVP. Normally you will be able to see A wave and V wave very clearly. The wave seen immediately after the radial pulse is a V wave, and the wave which is just before the radial pulse is a A wave. This is very clearly being identified, and that was labeled as Moodley's sign. Then there is another method, what we call as a Gartner's method, in which patient is in a 30-degree or a 45-degree, and you elevate the arm slowly, or we call passively, and it is raised from dependent position until the vein collapses. The height of the limb above the level of sternum angle at which the vein collapses represent the venous pressure. This is one of the indirect method. So suppose if the limb's vein gets collapsed, if the arm is just at the level of chest, indirectly at the sternal angle, we'll call normal. And if you require a little more height for collapse, it indicates elevated pressure. So when the pressure is normal, vein of the hand will collapse at the level of the sternal angle. But if you have to elevate above the sternal angle, it indicates elevation of pressure in the vein. That is elevated jugular venous pressure. So this is called Gartner's method, and this is just identifying the wave, that is called moodless sign. So this is indirect way you can identify. There is another technology called mace sign, M-A-Y, mace sign. So in a sitting posture, visible engorged vein under the surface of the tongue. If you just elevate the tongue and if you got a dilated engorged vein, it indicates elevated venous pressure. This is again an indirect sign suggesting elevated venous pressure means elevated jugular venous pressure. Now this is the most important thing, very frequently asked in your oral as well as in a short note, that how you differentiate between JVP pulse and carotid pulse. In a oral, very frequently asked. So jugular venous pulse is superficial and lateral in the neck, lateral to carotid but medial to sternomastoid, while carotid pulse is deeper and it is medial to venous pulse. JVP will be better seen rather than felt. If you try to feel for the JVP pulse, it will not be felt. You can see two waves, while carotid is better felt and it will be a sharp single pulse. JVP has got a two peak, that is A wave and V wave in cardiac cycle. Two ups and two downs, that is A followed by Y wave, V wave, A wave followed by Y descent, and then we have got a V wave. So we have got a two descent and two peaks, while carotid will have a single upstroke. So one upstroke and one downstroke. Descent is more prominent as compared to ascents, while here upstroke is brisk and more visible than descent. So here upstroke is better seen than descent. Here descent is better seen than ascent. You have got X and Y descent, which will be more prominent during inspiration, while here inspiration will not make any change as far as the upstroke or downstroke is concerned. A wave will decrease and V wave will increase during expiration. So A wave will become little less and V wave will be little more because of increased cardiac output during expiration. Well, there will be no effect of inspiration or expiration on carotid pulse. JVP will usually fall during inspiration and there will be no effect on inspiration on carotid pulse. But during deep inspiration, if JVP rises, gets elevated, it is called Kussmaul's sign, characteristic in a case of a constrictive pericarditis. Digital compression at the root of the neck can abolish the jugular venous pulse, but as far as artery is concerned, that digital pressure will have no effect as far as carotid pulsation is concerned, because by just digital compression, where you are occluding the venous, that cannot occlude the carotid pulse. So carotid pulse cannot be occluded by minimal pressure. You will require a more pressure to occlude the carotid pulse. This is difference given in the form of inspection, palpation, etc. Same thing what we have given, better visible, better palpable, oscillation wave with inward movement, which are more prominent. So descent are more prominent, while here ascents are more prominent. There are two peaks, here there is one peak, better seen in a triangle formed by the two heads of sternomastoid at the clavicle, while this is seen medial to sternomastoid. JVP independent of respiration, while height of pulsation varies with respiration. Sorry, this is reverse, it is written. So JVP will change with respiration, while carotid pulse will not change with respiration. And JVP will be more prominent in a supine posture, while carotid pulse will not have any change as far as position is concerned. And in palpation, we have mentioned that pulsation will not be palpable, while here you will be able to palpate the carotid pulse very clearly. And if we apply the pressure, JVP will disappear. And if we apply the pressure on abdomen, the pulsation will become more prominent and JVP will be elevated. While carotid pulse, this is just wrongly written. Sorry, this should not be taken into account. So venous pulse, more lateral, this is more medial, this is two waves, this is single wave, this decreases with inspiration, there is no change, increases in supine position as well as during expiration, this is no change. When you apply the abdominal pressure, this is elevated, there is no change. This is A and V wave peak with two descent, that is X and Y, while this is a single peak, single upstroke, single downstroke. This can be easily obliterated by pressure. This will require more pressure to obliterate, and to obliterate the carotid pulse you will require more pressure. With slight pressure you cannot obliterate. This is better seen than palpable, this is better palpable, and you will be able to see much better if you stand at the foot end of the bed as far as venous pulse is concerned. These are all the difference very frequently asked to you in your oral. Now we are going through a cardiac cycle and will be correlating with jugular venous pulse. So you know that whenever there is a atrial systole is just before the ventricular systole. So whenever there is an atrial systole, I am beginning with atrial systole. So atrial contracts with force, which is called active contraction of atrium because of the P wave. So whenever there is a P wave, there is an atrial systole, and whenever there is an atrial systole, there is a powerful contraction. So pressure from the atrium is easily transmitted to the superior vena cava and into the internal jugular vein. So because of that atrial systole, you will have A wave. This is A wave. As soon as the atrial systole gets over and atrial diastole begins, that is the stage where the ventricular systole begins, but the pressure in the atrium is falling. So this is X descent. So pressure is falling. When the pressure is falling, now this is the stage where there is an isovolumetric contraction. The pressure in the ventricle is building up. The tricuspid valve will close so that the blood from the ventricle cannot enter back into the atrium. And that is the stage where the ventricular systole is continuous and tricuspid valve is closing. At that stage, almost we say that the semilunar valve, that is aortic valve and pulmonary valve, will open. So that is the stage where this wave will be created. That is we call as a during ventricular systole. And this is slight uplift. Sometimes it is labeled as a C wave. By and large, it is not taken into consideration because the ventricle is in a systolic period, tricuspid valve is closed. So that just increases the little pressure in the atrial chamber, and which will be reflected in the form of a C wave during a downstroke. And this entire downstroke is labeled as X wave. And as soon as there is a ventricular ejection, you get an elevation of pressure in the atrium, which will be reflected back into jugular vein in the form of an upstroke, we call as a V wave. And at this stage, at the peak of the V wave, the tricuspid valve will open, and that tricuspid valve will open during ventricular diastole little after ventricular diastole begins, and that is we call as after isovolumetric relaxation period. And as soon as the tricuspid valve opens, the blood from the right atrium will rush to the ventricle, hence the pressure in the right atrium will fall, and this is the period where the atrium is filling. So the pressure in the atrium is building up, as well as simultaneously there is a ventricular systole. So that is the results of V wave. But atrial contraction is powerful. That's why the A wave is more prominent as compared to V wave. So V wave is because of the ventricular systole, which is lifting the tricuspid valve up towards the ventricular, in ventricular systole towards the right atrium, as well as during an atrial diastole, the atrium is filling, so the pressure is building up in an atrium, and that will be producing upstroke, second upstroke, and that we call as V wave. And as soon as the ventricular diastole begins, little after the isovolumetric relaxation period, the tricuspid valve will open, all the blood from the right atrium will rush into right ventricle, so there will be a fall, that is second fall. This is first, because the atrial diastole has begun, and that is the period where the pressure in the atrium is dropping, and here there is a drop in atrial pressure because of rush of a blood from atrium. Atrium is in a diastole, now ventricle is also in a diastole, so pressure in the ventricle is falling, as well as pressure in the atrium is also falling, because the blood is rushing from the right atrium into right ventricle, and that produces a second negative descent, what we call as a wide descent. So again, X descent is because of the pressure fall in the right atrium because of the atrial systole, followed by atrial diastole. So now as soon as the atrial diastole begins, there will be fall, what we call as a X descent. And Y descent is because of atrium is still in a diastolic period. Blood from the atrium is rushing into the ventricle, so there will be a fall of pressure in the atrium, as well as now ventricle is going into a ventricular diastolic period, so there is also fall in the ventricular pressure also. So pressure in the atrium is also falling and pressure in the ventricle is also falling, and that both combination together will produce a negative descent we call as a Y descent. So understand very well, A wave is because of atrial systole, V wave is because of the combination of atrium is filling up, building up the atrial pressure, as well as simultaneously there is a ventricular systole. Simultaneously there is a ventricular systole, so that is also pushing the tricuspid valve towards right atrium. So the pressure in the right atrium is increasing, that will produce a V wave. And X descent is atrium is in a diastole, that's why you are getting that X descent, and followed by a V wave. There is a sudden rush of a blood from the right atrium entering into the ventricle, and that will be producing Y descent, plus ventricle is also in a diastolic period, and both combination will produce a Y descent. So A wave, V wave, X descent and Y descent. Understand this very clearly. So these are the different wave. A wave is a presystolic, that is just before the first heart sound, and it is because of the powerful contraction of the right atrium, or we call it the active contraction of the right atrium, parallel to P wave in ECG. And this will be followed by what we call as a ventricular systole. And during ventricular systole, C wave is because of the bulging of the tricuspid valve into the right atrium because of the isovolumetric contraction period, and that gives rise to C wave. While V wave is because in a late systole, the atrium is filling up, so pressure is building up in a right atrium because of the venous return, and simultaneously the ventricle is also in a systolic period, and that will be producing a V wave. While descent, that is X descent, is a combination of a atrial relaxation, and with atrial relaxation the tricuspid valve is relaxed or it is moving down, and as far as the ventricular systole is concerned, in a ventricular systole there is an isovolumetric contraction period followed by a diastolic period, systole followed by a diastolic period. So during that diastolic period, the blood from the right atrium is entering into right ventricle because of opening of the tricuspid valve, and that will produce a sharp fall in a right atrial pressure, and that gives rise to a wide descent. So these are the components. So A and C wave are a positive wave, while X and Y descent are the negative wave, or we call it descent. A wave will be followed by X descent and V wave will be followed by Y descent. So I have already explained this. Negative descents are better seen than ascent. So this is a summary. A wave is presystolic, it is taller, it is brief, it is related to P wave, and on exertion it will be more prominent. While V wave is a passive filling, it is end of the systole, it is less tall, means it is less taller than V wave or A wave, it is little more sustained, and it is corresponding to T wave in an ECG. And response to exertion, usually there is no significant response to exertion. This is regarding a wave. I already explained that it is parallel to P wave. It will be parallel to P wave. Y descent. Now we are going to what are the different conditions which will produce abnormality of A wave. A wave will be elevated in any condition which increases the pressure in the right atrium. So A wave will be markedly prominent in a person who has got a tricuspid stenosis. It will be markedly prominent. As well as whenever there is an atrium and ventricle are contracting simultaneously, it will produce a giant A wave, and it is also described as cannon wave. And if the atrial contraction is very poor, A wave will be absent. Classical example, atrial flutter fibrillation. So we are going through that now. So prominent A wave in classical example, tricuspid stenosis. I am giving one single example. If they ask you anything more, then only you utter something else. So classical is tricuspid stenosis. This is not a common condition. We call it as a right atrial myxoma, and congenital anomaly called tricuspid atresia. So this will produce a really giant A wave. And also you will be getting, if right ventricle pressure gets elevated, in case of a pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, acute pulmonary embolism, right ventricular MI, and RV cardiomyopathy. If they ask you anything else, then only try to utter these conditions. These are all because of right ventricle and pulmonary hypertension groups. So pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, RV cardiomyopathy, acute pulmonary embolism will produce sharp elevation of blood pressure in a pulmonary artery, and occasionally RVMI. So this will be those conditions. Absolutely rare I'll say, because of a severe LVH and thickened ventricular septum. So it will create a little more increased pressure on the right ventricle, like in a severe AS and HOCM or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Always answer TS first. Second, you can say tricuspid atresia is more common than right atrial myxoma. So answer this as a last. Why? Because of a RV, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, acute pulmonary embolism, RV cardiomyopathy, and RVMI, and absolutely rare, severe aortic stenosis and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So prominent A wave, first always remember tricuspid stenosis, tricuspid atresia, and then you can put right atrial myxoma. And other conditions related to RV, congestive heart failure, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, RVMI, acute cor pulmonale, or we call it the acute massive pulmonary embolism, etc. So you can put that RV cardiomyopathy, acute pulmonary embolism, acute TR also can also. Okay, so we will skip over. Giant A wave, remember a regular cannon wave will be in a junctional rhythm, because you can have a P wave and QRS complex coming together. So you will have a atrial and ventricle contraction together. or in a retrograde conduction. I am not going into detail. And AV dissociation also, but you can mention junctional rhythm as a common condition. And irregular Cannon wave, only remember one condition, that is complete heart block. Don't try to answer these groups. Yes, if you are aware of it and if you can explain, then only go through. During your internship, while doing ECG, we might talk about this AV dissociation, ventricular pressing, ventricular ectopics, etc. So forget about all those. So giant A wave, remember only two conditions: one, complete heart block, irregular Cannon waves, while in a case of a regular Cannon waves, junctional rhythm, where P wave is overlapped by QRS complex. So in that condition, you will have a giant A wave, or it is also called as venous corrigan. You got an arterial corrigan in an aortic regurgitation. This is called venous corrigan, or also called as a Cannon waves, giant A wave or Cannon wave or venous corrigan. You can remember those names. So just remember two: junctional rhythm and complete heart block. So in that conditions, you will have irregular, and in junctional it will be regular. Forget about this AV sequence. I have put this particular difference between AV sequence and Cannon wave. How exactly do you get? So at your leisure time you can go through. We'll be dealing with this when we do ECG and correlation with other findings. A wave will be absent. I've already told you, if the atrial contraction is very poor, classical in case of a atrial fibrillation. Not very common. If there is a severe sinus tachycardia, then you might have a little decrease in the A wave, and in that case you might have a absent A wave. Not very common, but classical example of absent A wave is only atrial flutter fibrillation. Fibrillation is a better example rather than atrial flutter. Now we go to the V wave. V wave, we have already told you that V wave is because of atrial filling, and simultaneously there is a ventricular systole which is going on. So if there is a ventricular systole and there is a TR, then it will produce a prominent V wave. So in a TR, you will get a prominent V wave because of ventricular systole. The blood from the ventricle is through the regurgitation. It is coming to RA and it is reflected into JVP, and that will give a markedly prominent V wave. So this should be the first answer. Forget about a large ASD, severe congestive heart failure, cor pulmonale, etc. Don't answer this, any one of this. Don't try to answer any one of this in oral exam. Yes, if they ask you anything more, then after TR, you can mention regarding a atrial septal defect. So large ASD can also produce a prominent V wave. But diminished V wave means there's a decreased cardiac output of a ventricle. In that case, you can have a diminished V wave, and classical example of a diminished V wave will be hypovolemic shock. So in a case of a hypovolemic shock, you will have a almost very low V wave, or V wave may be nearly not seen. Now we go to the X descent. We have already mentioned X descent will be markedly prominent in case of constrictive pericarditis, cardiac tamponade, and ASD. Answer these two first. Prominent X descent. And X descent, because X descent is because of a atrial diastole, and that will become less prominent or absent in case of a TR. So remember only one condition, TR. While prominent X descent, more classical in case of a constrictive pericarditis and cardiac tamponade. So X descent will be more prominent in these two conditions, and secondary to this, you will have a prominent JVP. JVP will be elevated, and that we call as a Kussmaul's sign. We already mentioned regarding this abnormality, that is a prominent V wave in TR and diminished. We have already mentioned this. This is repeated again, sorry. This is again repeated, sorry, I'm skipping over that. Now, prominent wide descent in severe TR and slow wide descent in TS. Remember these two conditions. TR will produce a very big wide descent because the tricuspid valve remains open, so it will be a prominent wide descent. While in TS, the blood will find difficulty to enter into the right ventricle during a ventricular diastolic period. Hence, the wide descent will be slow and reduced. This is, I'm not talking about, we have talked about all these conditions. No one is going to ask regarding this. I'm putting this slide at your leisure time. You can go through what happens in a post CABG, atrial fibrillation, tricuspid regurgitation, complete heart block, tamponade heart constriction, RV infarct. We are not interested. So these are the normal pressure wave, A wave, C wave, V wave. You can see in a tamponade, A and C wave are almost becoming equal. And in a constriction, you can see that V wave is becoming more prominent as compared to even a tamponade. And this is what we call as a during deep inspiration, the person will have a prominent V wave. And that is one of the characteristics in case of a constrictive pericarditis, and that we also label as Kussmaul's sign. Now regarding jugular venous pressure, okay, we'll try to finish up in a jugular venous pressure. It will be easy. So jugular venous pressure is a venous pressure in the interval, internal jugular vein, and that reflects indirectly the pressure in the right atrium and right ventricle. So that you can examine by the height of, vertical height of the column in internal jugular vein, or by measuring the pressure in the right atrium, or by measuring the pressure in the right ventricle. We'll call as a right atrial pressure or a right ventricular pressure, and that is sometimes taken as a central venous pressure. And to measure that, you can put a catheter directly, or indirect way of measuring a central venous pressure is by looking at the pressure in the jugular vein. And we have already mentioned how you are looking at the jugular venous pulse. Same technology, but here we are measuring the height of a vertical column. And how exactly you measure, I'll show you. The position remains same. Usually JVP is less than 8 centimeter. Already from the center of the right atrium up to the sternal angle, it is 5 centimeter. So in a 45-degree angle, above the sternal angle, whatever is the height, you have to add 5. That will give you the exact height of JVP column. So if JVP column is 3 centimeter above the sternal angle, we'll call JVP is 8 centimeter. 5 plus 3. And how exactly you do? It is this way. From the right atrium to the sternal angle, it is 5 centimeter. So you put a foot rule here and you measure the height, this vertical height, and that you have to add to 5. Say here it is 2. 5 plus 2 is 7. If it is 3, 5 plus 3 is 8. Clear? So that is how you measure. So here you are measuring, say from this right atrium, it is 5. Right? So 5 plus 5, 10. Here 5 plus 4, 7. 5 per floor, 9. So central venous pressure is approximately 9. So you measure that particular vertical column, and if pressure is elevated more than 10, we consider that as elevated central venous pressure, or we call elevated jugular venous pressure. Now we are mentioning the condition, and depending upon the pathophysiology, we are putting the name. But whenever you mention regarding the elevated jugular venous pressure, always mention first in your oral exam right ventricular failure, or we call congestive heart failure. That should be the first cause. So right ventricular failure or congestive heart failure. Then you can mention pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, RV infarct, tricuspid stenosis, tricuspid atresia, right atrial myxoma, constrictive pericarditis, excessive volume overload like renal failure, IV fluid overload, then rare condition like superior vena cava obstruction, and then you can go for even cor pulmonale. But first should be right ventricular infarct. So this will be the condition where you will have elevated central venous pressure and elevated jugular venous pressure. I am repeating again. RVF or congestive heart failure, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, RV infarct. As far as the tricuspid valve is concerned too, tricuspid stenosis, tricuspid atresia, and even you can mention Epstein anomaly, right atrial myxoma, constrictive pericarditis. Also you can mention ASD, volume overload, renal failure, IV fluid overload, and odd condition, superior vena cava obstruction and cor pulmonale, COPD with cor pulmonale. So now, as far as reduced JVP, only one condition, hypovolemic shock. So first we'll talk of a bilateral pulsatile elevated JVP, congestive heart failure, RV failure, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension, ASD, tricuspid stenosis, tricuspid regurgitation, right atrial myxoma, RVMI, constrictive pericarditis, cardiac tamponade, pericardial effusion, cor pulmonale, COPD, abdominal condition wise, ascites, pregnancy, and another we have told you IV fluid overload, renal failure, cirrhosis of liver, and excessive IV fluid overload. This will be all bilateral. Unilateral non-pulsatile will be superior vena cava obstruction, will produce bilateral. Unilateral non-pulsatile will be in a case of an innominate vein thrombosis, and that will produce what we call as unilateral, and more commonly left JVP will be elevated and non-pulsatile. If there is a massive right side pleural effusion, may also lead to increased superior vena cava pressure, and that will produce bilateral non-pulsatile JVP. Not very common, rare. Only one answer should be given if there is a question asked. Bilateral non-pulsatile, only superior vena cava obstruction, and in unilateral and left side mainly innominate vein thrombosis. So that will be there. Or you can mention internal jugular vein thrombosis. So those will be the condition. So this is a very important slide, very frequently asked in your oral, and you can be asked as a short note on jugular venous pressure. So do remember. So if jugular venous pressure is elevated and column is elevated during deep inspiration, which is just opposite of a normal phenomena, we call Kussmaul's sign, classically in case of a constrictive pericarditis, and then you can mention cardiac tamponade, volume overload, superior vena cava obstruction, where there is no pulsation. So just forget about that. In a superior vena cava, it is non-pulsatile. So there will be usually no change during inspiration. So almost we have covered up majority. There is one another thing very frequently asked in your oral is abdominojugular reflex, or also we call as a hepatojugular reflux. In short, we call as a HJR, or we call as a AJR. Abdominojugular AJR, hepatojugular HJR, in which at a 45-degree angle, you first observe for the upper level of the JVP column. You apply a pressure in the right hypochondrium below the right costal margin. Maintain that pressure. JVP will be elevated. And when you release, equal time will be taken to fall in a JVP. This is classical in case of a right ventricular failure. Also, you will be able to demonstrate this in a case of a tricuspid regurgitation. And it will be very well demonstrable in a person who has got latent right ventricular failure and silent TR. In those conditions, it will be better demonstrable. So, positive HJR is classical in case of elevated central venous pressure, right ventricular failure, left ventricular failure, TR. Also in case of a right ventricular MI, in all these conditions, it will be positive. While they say that in a COPD, it will be false positive because of increased intrathoracic pressure. So positive HJR, classical in case of a latent right ventricular failure, compensated right ventricular failure, left ventricular failure and TR. Remember these four conditions. And as far as the false positive, HJR will be in case of a COPD only. Try to remember that. If they ask you anything more, then increase sympathetic activity and sympathetic vasoconstriction. Forget about all those. I've already explained you Kussmaul sign. The person, when he takes a deep inspiration, there is an increased venous return, and a person who has got already increased pressure in the pericardial sac, it will produce elevation in a JVP. In normal person, there is a fall in JVP. In place of that, if there is an elevation of JVP during inspiration, we call that as a Kussmaul sign, and it is a characteristic in a case of a constrictive pericarditis rather than we call as cardiac tamponade. Kussmaul sign is also called as a venous pulsus paradoxus. So in a normal person, during a deep inspiration, there is a fall. Instead of that, there is an elevation of jugular venous pressure, and hence it is also called as a venous pulsus paradoxus. Kussmaul sign can be asked to you in your oral and also can be asked as a short note. So do remember, I've already told you, classical example, constrictive pericarditis. You can also demonstrate in a severe right heart failure or severe left ventricular failure, or we call congestive heart failure. Also in case of a restrictive cardiomyopathy, massive pulmonary embolism, RVMI, you can have Kussmaul sign positive, but classical in case of a constrictive pericarditis. In a short note, you can mention all these other causes also. So constrictive pericarditis is first, severe right heart failure, RVMI, restrictive cardiomyopathy, cardiac tamponade, severe congestive heart failure, tricuspid stenosis, and impaired RV compliance, which is very characteristic in case of a RVMI. So in all these conditions, you can have Kussmaul signs positive. Mechanism, I am not going into detail. In all these conditions, during inspiration, there is increase in the negative intrathoracic pressure, increased venous return. Already there is an external pressure on the right ventricle, hence further elevation of jugular venous pulse. This is a chart which is showing you a JVP, A wave, V wave, X descent, Y descent and Kussmaul signs in dilated cardiomyopathy, restrictive cardiomyopathy, myocardial failure, cardiac tamponade, constrictive pericarditis. So in all these different conditions, endomyocardial fibrosis, this is endomyocardial fibrosis, sorry. This is EMF is endomyocardial fibrosis. So what happens to the JVP is mentioned in detail. No one is going to ask you. This is for MD cardiology and MD exams. So I end my lecture here. Some of the things are little bit in more detail, but very commonly asked to you in your oral. Good number of short notes are there from this chapter. That is, JVP can be asked as a short note. Jugular venous pulse can be asked as a short note. Jugular venous pressure can be asked as a short note. Kussmaul signs can be asked as a short note. Cannon wave can be asked in our oral. So there are good number of things which can be asked. Both pulse and pressure is important. Also, it is important from your everyday practice point of view, because if you look properly for a JVP and if you can pick up, you will be able to pick up congestive heart failure in early stages, and it is one of the signs which will be easily demonstrable. Also, abdominojugular reflux or HJR is asked as a short note. So this is the important chapter. So I end my lecture here. I thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate you for spending some of the time with me. If you like this particular lecture, please press button like and share. You can comment and you can share with your friends, and you can subscribe also. So I end my lecture here. Now a series of clinical side in a cardiovascular system is getting over. Now we'll be proceeding with what we call as a symptomatology of cardiovascular system.